I'm Riley Carlson. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Our top stories this hour. Mali's security crisis deepens. Coordinated attacks leave a key town in rebel hands and the defense minister dead. Iran's top diplomat heads to Moscow from Pakistan. A security lockdown in Islamabad is lifted, suggesting U.S.-Iran talks are not imminent. A ceasefire in name only.
Not paying enough for everything yet.
Targets in southern Lebanon, killing 14 people, while Hezbollah fires back. And the gunman suspected of trying to storm a dinner attended by President Trump is identified by U.S. media. Investigators say he'll be charged on Monday. Mali's defense minister has been killed after his residence came under attack. It was part of a wave of coordinated assaults by al-Qaeda-linked fighters and Tuareg forces, which have targeted military sites across the country. General Sergio Camara was a central figure in the military government and instrumental in strengthening ties with Russia.
Sentiment, a little bit more of a risk-on tone ahead of those results. And we are expecting the FOMC not necessarily to do anything, given, of course, that we're still contending with the latest headlines from the Iran war, the oil shock as well. Same story for the Bank of Japan.
Today, these are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans?
I like this kid.
The Mandalorian and Grogu, rated PG.
The Tuaregs wave the flag of Azawad, the homeland they want to create in northern Mali. It appears armed groups are achieving what many in Europe are struggling to do: force Russian fighters to retreat.
For industrial profits earnings for Chinese companies this week.
This is
thought it would be hilarious to trap her brother in the shower.
Whoa! Progress over the weekend. Of course, we've had other sort of headlines dominating. We know that this round of talks and a trip potentially by President Trump is now put on hold for now. At the moment, this is the picture when it comes to trading in New York. Crude, we're seeing WTI higher by close to 2%, really holding on to those gains. The efforts to resume these peace talks stalling. The ceasefire is still holding, of course, but that chokehold when it comes to the key Strait of Hormuz waterway, with the blockade still in place, we're now entering the third month.
Everything's still in a holding pattern, except my bank account.
Now saying that this is the biggest energy supply shock in history as a result of this conflict. Taking a look at some of the other assets that we're watching, gold at the moment, we're seeing a bit of downside, about 0.6%. Really, the coming back to what we're seeing when it comes to the losses in gold that have really been incurred since the start of this conflict. And we're also watching Australian stocks. Just to mention, it is a public holiday in some parts of Australia today on account of Anzac Day, but the ASX remains trading. We're looking like a pretty flat start coming off the back of 4 sessions of losses for Aussie stocks. Sherry.
And Heidi, we're also following the latest on the breaking news development over the weekend. A 31-year-old man set to be arraigned Monday over Saturday night's shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington. The acting attorney general saying that the suspect was probably targeting Trump administration officials, but his exact motive is not yet clear. The president told 60 Minutes why there appeared to be a delay getting him and the First Lady to safety.
Well, what happened is it was a little bit me. I wanted to see what was happening, and I wasn't making it that easy for him. I wanted to see what was going on. And by that time, we started to realize maybe it was a bad problem, different kind of a problem, bad one, and different than what would be normal noise from a ballroom, which you hear all the time. And I was surrounded by great people, and I probably made them act a little bit more slowly.
Best part was when you fell down when you tried to walk, you fat
Well, in the meantime,
fuck.
peace talks between the US and Iran have stalled after President Trump cancelled a planned trip by his top envoys. Tehran says it won't negotiate as long as it's being threatened.
It's very simple. Look, that whole deal is not complicated. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple.
Same story every day with this guy.
Haven't even thought thought about it yet.
Of course you haven't thought about it. You don't buy gas or groceries, you fat fuck.
They offered a lot, but they offered a lot.
They didn't
but not
offer
enough.
anything. Bullshit.
Let's bring up politics editor Laura Davison for more. Laura, we know really other events over the weekend have sort of overtaken the spotlight when it comes to these impending talks. We know that the Vice President is not headed for this next round of talks, at least for now. Does it feel like momentum is being lost? Where is the pressure that we keep talking about, particularly when it comes to the pressure on the president?
There is none. He just said
right
it.
now there isn't quite the same pressure that we've seen. Trump declined to give another sort of intermediary deadline, like he's done in rounds past. If he's set, a deadline from a couple days to a couple weeks,
the prices keep going up, been up, been up.
He didn't have much success with that, and so what we saw last week is him just
going to do wonders for the GOP.
The deadline sort of indefinitely, and he was waiting on Iran, essentially putting the pressure on them to have a proposal. There's been a game.
They're
really
blowing you off, man.
Both from the Iranian side and the U.S. side about sending mediators to Pakistan to talk. We did see Iran send an official over the weekend, but it was unclear whether he was there to actually meet with U.S. officials. He framed it more as a sort of.
Thanks, man. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Pakistani officials as well as other Gulf leaders as he toured around. The U.S. Didn't send anyone. Trump said he canceled the trip from J.D. Vance and
how's your Trump devotion syndrome doing?
And Jared Kushner and going. And right now,
maybe you should rub some ivermectin on your taint. That'll get rid of it.
Events over the weekend, really focusing on the attack at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and the security situation therein. So this is really a situation where you see the White House almost catapulting from crisis to crisis. And while the White House is a big operation, lots of people who focus on lots of different issues. This of course there's only so much capacity for the president to absorb so many things and be in so many places and focused on so many things at once. So this is kind of adding another layer of complication, particularly when it comes to sending U.S. officials overseas when there's already concerns about security of U.S. officials within the borders of the U.S.
And how big of a complication
because everybody
is
in this administration is incompetent.
Tensions seem to be escalating again.
This is, again, sort of another, it's a symptom of the broader, disarray here. Having the Hezbollah Lebanon ceasefire in place is sort of seen as a key to have these broader discussions move forward. And with this seemingly fraying,
it's years, not tears, you dumb fuck.
And over the past several
and who
days,
cares? Biden isn't here anymore. So we should just be happy with the high prices we have today, even though they're not as high yet as they were under Biden.
There's a bunch of different pieces.
It's a bullshit argument.
On the president's plate as well.
It's a gay bullshit argument.
Be traveling to China here in the next 2
and
weeks.
Give it some time.
President Xi, that initial
they'll
trip
get there
canceled because of the war. So we're just seeing a lot of things pile up, and this puzzle get more
Dumbass.
complicated, not less, as we drag into this 2-month anniversary of this war set to hit tomorrow.
Laura, you mentioned, of course, the shooting that we're.
Trump thought he was going to have an easy win here, a couple days, like Putin thought he'd have in Ukraine.
There are a number of really extraordinary.
It's working out just as well.
Developments when it comes to how this played out. Are there concerns about security at this point?
Yes, after any of these events like we saw, during the presidential campaign when there was assassination attempt on President Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania, there's a wholesale review at the U.S. Secret Service about what went wrong. And,
so many guns in this country and so many bad shooters. I mean, how do you miss a target that fucking large?
Annual events in D.C., a ballroom with thousands of
people.
Jesus
Christ.
And the attacker was able to blow past an initial checkpoint, was not able to make his way into the ballroom, but was able to get closer than a lot of people really
Good
felt
security.
was comfortable and before he was tackled and arrested and detained. This is a 31-year-old man from California. There are some initial charges related to firearm procurement that have been charged. There expect to be more and a formal arraignment in Washington on Monday. But this has really rattled both the White House, the press corps in D.C., as well as raising a lot of questions about a Secret Service that has been under fire and gone through several leaders here in recent years as there have been a series of security breaches, particularly involving the President Trump.
Bloomberg Politics editor Laura Davison with the latest. Coming up on the Asia Trade, we speak to the South Korean Trade Minister about threats to their AI-fueled export boom after the Iran war and the threat of high energy prices. Much more ahead. This is Bloomberg.
up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Stephen Engel at Japan's Akasaka Palace in Tokyo, and this is Bloomberg.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
Watch Bloomberg Tech.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
You're watching Bloomberg Deals.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
This is Bloomberg Television. Middle East tensions are high.
Both sides willing to go back to the battlefield.
The narrative changes moment to moment.
Is there a ceasefire? Is there not a ceasefire? Markets are up, markets are down.
Count on Bloomberg for up-to-the-minute reporting.
Breaking news this morning.
Breaking news in the last few minutes.
On-the-ground perspective.
Talking to you from the bomb shelter.
This White House still pushing.
And the analysis you need to make informed decisions fast.
Clearly, nothing is final until it's well and truly final.
The really important question is whether we'll get second-round effects.
Nobody covers geopolitics like Bloomberg.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
Breaking news today from Wall Street to Washington.
Earnings season is underway. We're going to get some key reports.
Everything you need to know before the markets open on Monday.
Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a little Bloomberg into your weekend routine.
Guys, buckle up.
Wednesday, the Fed decides.
Regime change at the Fed. It's a matter of when and not if.
This is not a small matter.
Trust Bloomberg to bring you the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis, including Powell's press conference.
A series of shocks have interrupted progress.
We've completely priced out a rate cut for 2026.
This is a really tough time for all of us in markets.
There is nothing this institution can do in the face of the shock elsewhere.
Tune in to Bloomberg Surveillance. The Fed decides, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.
U.S. Senator Tom Tillis says he's dropping his opposition to Captain Warsh's nomination as the next Federal Reserve Chair. Tillis says the Justice Department's
Let Warsh
decision
lower
to end
rates.
a criminal investigation into Fed Chair
Completely
Jerome
destroy the
Powell
economy.
will pose a threat to the central bank's independence. The move sets the stage for a faster confirmation of Warsh to succeed Powell, whose term ends on May 15th.
I am prepared, and with the assurances from the Department of Justice that the
From
case
Judge
is
Box of Wine?
completely and
You're going to take her
fully
word
settled,
for it? She
that
takes
the
her orders
appeal
from
would
Trump.
only be used to potentially abrogate or change the ruling for administrative purposes, not as a basis for reopening the investigation, and that the only way an investigation would be opened would be a criminal referral from one of the most respected inspector generals there. I am prepared to move on with the confirmation of Mr. Warsh. I think he's going to be a great Fed chair.
Good. What could go wrong?
The Fed is among major central banks delivering policy decisions this week and is expected to join the Bank of Japan, the ECB, and the Bank of England in holding rates steady. Policymakers are keeping a hawkish eye on fallout from the Iran war as higher energy prices and inflation risks dominate the outlook, and President Trump cancels planned peace talks with Iran. Take a look at how we're looking across markets early in the Asia session because, of course, we have the S&P 500 very close to record highs. A little bit of pressure in the future session early Monday morning, but global equities enter the week around record highs already. The S&P 500, in fact, is up about 10% since the end of March. We're headed for the best month since late 2020. And, of course, remember, we have big tech earnings this week. The dollar a little bit firmer early in the Asian session, Heidi.
Well, S&P Global Vice Chairman Daniel Yergin has warned that the Strait of Hormuz crisis represents the biggest energy disruption ever seen. Yergin told us that the impact extends far beyond oil, affecting assets including fertilizer, helium, and aluminium.
One of the things that people didn't think about before this happened, if they thought about the Strait of Hormuz, they thought about oil. Maybe they thought about natural gas and LNG. They didn't think about fertilizer. They didn't think about helium. They didn't think about aluminum. They didn't think about petrochemicals. And it turned out that that region is much more integrated into the global economy because of all the economic development.
I'm not paying enough for everything right now, so let's just let this linger and keep going on.
World's helium, which you need to make semiconductors or MRI machines. So this is actually, unlike all the other things we were talking about in the last 20 years, this is a much bigger disruption of the global economy. But it's Asia, because basically, economically, the Strait of Hormuz went east. 80% of the oil, 90% of the LNG went to Asia, and that's where the shortfall is in ways that people really didn't model.
I saw Fatih Birol of the International Energy Agency saying we are facing the biggest energy security threat in history. And I wonder if you agree with that
They don't give a fuck. Welcome, Charisse.
Your perspective is on this moment in the wider sweep
I think this is the biggest energy disruption we've ever seen. But as you say, it's ironic that we're not seeing the full price impact, and so time is really the key factor here.
When you look at this, is it so bad because geographically there's just really no alternative, as there have been in some other conflicts? Obviously there are pipelines that go out to the Red Sea, but you just can't get that volume through anywhere else. And as we've also been talking about, how concerned are you that this could be a chronic problem? Just because Iran agrees to something in the room doesn't mean they're going to change their minds if they've shown they have the capacity to shut this down.
Yeah, there was, until this happened, there was a thing called the TSS, the Traffic Separator System, where people understood that, okay, in an orderly way, this goes this way, this goes this way. Now there's going to be uncertainty over it, and it raises questions not only about the Strait, but it raises the question about freedom of seas on which the world economy and world trade really depends. So I think we come out of this, there's going to be an uneasiness about it, and so much will be critical as to what the outcome will be. Will there be an actual system and understanding of how this operates, or is it something that will fluctuate?
S&P Global Vice Chairman Daniel Yergin speaking to Bloomberg's David Gura and Christina Ruffini. Let's discuss the markets now with Bloomberg Life strategist Mark Cranfield, who joins us with the latest. And Mark, of course, we have
How's your Sunday going, Charisse?
About the uncertainty around
doing anything exciting?
What happens to oil prices as well. And given the week of central bank decisions, is it really not that surprising that we're not expecting any big moves?
I wouldn't say we're not expecting any big moves. When you start the week with oil prices back above $100, and you've got a slew of earnings from the major tech companies as well, plus you really don't know how the central bankers are going to interpret the whole thing, the shortfall between energy prices in the near term and yet slowdown of economies in the longer term. There's plenty that can happen. I don't think we're in for a quiet week at all. And then, of course, you can always throw in the occasional headline that comes out from the US as well. So quiet, no. I don't think there's any chance of that this week.
No, to be fair, I was talking about no big moves from central banks. I mean, we are expecting those gyrations in the market, right? I'm in Japan, so I'm very much watching the Japanese yen. How closely
back to work tomorrow?
The bond space as well, because it's been interesting. The volatility hasn't necessarily been that pronounced in the rate space.
I think that's where, if you're going to get surprises from the central banks, it would be what they do to the market curves in terms of yields. Generally, there's been a bit of flattening in bond curves in the G10 space, and that certainly is, people go into this, they don't expect too much disruption in that, but certainly with so many central bankers and with so many things up in the air, you definitely got the chance for some surprises here, particularly from the European Central Bank. They come into it with quite a split in between. There's a very big committee, more than 20 people on it. There's lots of varying decisions about whether
Did you ever see the movie Office Space?
Whether they need to raise interest rates early or whether they need to delay it when they need more information about what the energy price impact is going to be. So certainly there is room, particularly with the press conference from Christine Lagarde, there's room for plenty of volatility around the ECB meeting. Even the Bank of Japan, Governor Ueda, who's probably feeling a little bit disappointed that he has to push back and not raise interest rates this week, but he wants to prepare the market to get the neutral rate in place for Japan before too long. So he may well push pretty hard to get expectations.
Sounds like you're going to have a case of the Mondays, Charisse. Welcome, more.
Whatever he has to say in his press conference could also cause a bit of volatility in the JGB market, and maybe even for the dollar yen as well. So what central bankers have to say in terms of their outlook, how they gauge the effects of energy prices and potential slowdowns in economies, consumers pulling back in the months ahead, that is the place where bond traders especially will be looking for any disruptions there, chances for them to make trades, whether the curve steepening is justified or whether they need to make changes to that.
Mark, we've seen some of the big tech companies that comprise, a quarter of the market cap of the S&P 500, and certainly the biggest drivers of this record rally that we continue to see. How much these companies, the likes of Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, really need to not just meet expectations, but perhaps over-deliver on expectations to try and counterweigh the negativity over the war and oil prices?
That's what we've seen consistently over the past sets of earnings, whether it's from American companies or from Asian companies. It's all about the outlook. It's all about justifying to investors that these huge amounts of money which are going into AI data centers, into the whole build out of AI, whether it is justified in terms of what they see in the pipeline ahead. If the big tech companies in America can make investors continue to believe that there is even better times to come, that the profitability coming out of AI products is going to be just as good or even better than what they've seen so far, then investors will be in a very good mood. The equity rally will continue. It's a very high bar, and we've seen how quickly companies can get punished. You can just look at the difference between, say, a company like Intel. Satisfied investors very
possible
well.
war.
Goes up very high. Then you look at
a lot of weirdness surrounding that guy.
ASML, they were disappointing. The stock goes down quickly as well. So it's a very binary situation. Investors are not going to waste their time for too long. If companies don't justify what
he should have spent more time at the gun range, though.
Hard, but there's potential for a very good upside if they do meet where the market is pricing for them in the future. So forward earnings are suggesting that they can continue to do so, but they need to justify it in how they position themselves. It's a very big week from that point of view, and it will make the difference between whether equity markets go into May on a very solid footing or whether they don't. It's really up to those big four tech companies.
Bloomberg MLive strategist Mark Ryanfield kicking off a busy week, big tech, but of course also the busiest week when it comes to earnings here in Asia as well. More ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
Now, his family had a lot of money, right? I don't know what they did, but they looked well off. He was well educated. People just snap, I guess. I don't know. Or like you said, he got recruited. Who knows? Charisse, did you eat all the brownies?
About 80% of projects will find it difficult to secure financing.
You're going to be hearing about it for quite a while. That and the ballroom. Got to have the ballroom now. Got to have the ballroom.
Technically prepared projects, but
he's going to milk this for all it's worth.
So one of the major challenges is the stock or availability of bankable projects in countries. Almost all countries have got good plans and ideas, but when you look at the readiness of those projects, that's a major obstacle. And that is why the African Development Bank, through the African Water Facility, invests heavily in upstream preparation of projects to enable countries to have a large pool of investable projects.
Are they regular brownies or special brownies?
Institutional and regulatory environment in most countries, which make it difficult for investment to happen.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise.
Yeah, War, I don't think his poll numbers are going to do much. I think everybody's pretty much over him, no matter what. At the end of the day, he's still a pig and a racist and a sexist.
Says the country's auto market will stabilize this year, with electric vehicles continuing to gain share despite a weak first quarter. Li Hongqin told us exclusively that the company remains committed to pure EVs and is targeting full-year profitability in 2026.
Looking at China's auto market consumption this year, specifically in the first quarter compared to the same period last year, retail sales figures for the entire market declined nearly 18%. This was due to a variety of reasons, including changes in the tax system, changes in electric vehicle subsidy policies, and intense competition. Manufacturers likely made a sales push at the end of last year, releasing some pent-up consumer demand. However, we still believe that the overall market size in China will remain at a similar level to last year, meaning that the next 9 months will see a significant increase compared to the same period last year. Another point is for companies like ours that manufacture electric vehicles. The electric vehicle category is still growing. Although the overall market pressure is relatively high, the trend of pure electric vehicles replacing other energy forms, especially gasoline vehicles, remains unchanged. We predict that in 3 to 5 years, more than 80% of new cars in China will be new energy vehicles, and 80% of those will be pure electric.
They should be.
Currently, there are probably only 2 companies worldwide still adhering to the pure electric.
Oh, they're not out of a box, Charisse?
And an
They're from scratch?
in the US.
Nice.
We think
You have too much time on your hands.
And wait for this market
You need a part-time job on the weekends or something.
When are you going to be full year profitable? Going to be this year?
This year presents significant challenges. As you can see, starting in January, due to various reasons, raw material prices have risen very rapidly. This presents us with new challenges, but our goal and determination to achieve profitability for the entire year of 2026 remains unchanged.
Any plans for a battery swapping division IPO?
Currently, we don't have an IPO on the agenda. Our battery swapping service remains a service department within NIO. We hope they can set aside short-term financial pressures and focus on serving our 1 million car owners.
NIO co-founder and President Li Hongqin speaking
Hello, Lola.
exclusively to
Welcome.
Bloomberg's Stephen Engel at the Beijing Auto Show. We, in fact, will be watching some more earnings out of China, including BYD and Geely as well. They're also expected to benefit from higher oil prices, boosting EV demand. More ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
So I guess during Trump's interview with 60 Minutes, he called Norah O'Donnell a disgrace and horrible. He's never going to change. Never going to change. I'm going to bookmark that. That's good for a video tomorrow.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute space news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Ed Ludlow at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and this is Bloomberg.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm David Gura.
I'm Lisa Mateo.
And I'm Christina Ruffini. We're tracking breaking news today from Wall Street to Washington.
Let's start overseas.
Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a
Welcome, Belinda.
Bloomberg into your weekend routine. Watch,
Nice to see you.
listen, stream.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
So Norah O'Donnell has asked Trump if there's anything he can do as president about political violence. And Trump's response is, I do think the hate speech of the Democrats is very dangerous.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Every weekday from 3 to 5 Eastern.
Only on Bloomberg.
Absolutely horrible human being.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, Mondays on Bloomberg.
Now he's blaming No Kings rallies.
5 of the so-called Magnificent 7 U.S. tech giants are set to
Good
report this
Lord.
week, with analysts expecting robust revenue gains as they continue to capitalize on AI investments. But Alphabet, Amazon,
They're pushing
Meta,
for
and
it.
Microsoft facing rising margin and cost pressures made worse by
He's the
war in
most
Iran.
in-shape president
Apple
ever,
continues to
Charisse,
grapple
and
with
don't
higher
ever
memory
argue
chip
about it.
prices and the risk of prolonged supply chain disruptions. We're also keeping a close eye on tech here in Asia. Massive gains from TSMC, Samsung, and SK Hynix have helped elevate Taiwan and South Korea in global equity rankings. This chart also showing tech-heavy Asian markets muscling past their European counterparts. For more, let's bring in our Asia equities reporter, Sang-mi Cha. Sang-mi, we have just mentioned some of the challenges that U.S. tech companies face, but across Asia, we're seeing valuations lower, perhaps a bit more appetite for investors to come in and continue this AI surge higher?
That's right, Sherry. We're seeing about $4.3 trillion of market cap for Taiwan, and it has surpassed that of the UK just earlier this month. And South Korea is about to do the same, just away 140 billion, in fact, to catch up the UK. And UK being like the biggest market cap across Europe, and it's done the same for Germany and France. So these two North Asian countries are really taking over the European equity market one by one. And we're seeing this because it really trickles down.
Because she's got dirt on him, Charisse.
Right? TSMC, the logic chip maker in Taiwan, Samsung and SK Hynix in South Korea behind these AI chips. And it's actually, you can see
Is it my volume, Belinda, or the newsfeed volume?
So in Taiwan, we have seen the exports in March rally the most in the fastest pace in 16 years. And for South Korea, it's been rising 40% the second for the two months in consecutive months we have seen. So we see these data. It's really you can see that they're exporting these chips across the world, and these are leading to this unstoppable rally in equity markets.
Is it time to get a little bit cautious about just how much influence these tech stocks have in Asia?
There are these concerns, and some investors are noting that there are these weightings, right? SK Hynix and Samsung make up about 40% together in Kospi index, and for TAIEX, it's
loud and clear, Charisse. Thank you.
Is again taking up almost half of the entire benchmark. So that does point to that concentration risk. But in fact, when you look at TAIEX,
testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3,
a little bit because it's been trickling down, through other supply chains like Delta Electronics and MediaTek. So investors are saying that as the AI integration becomes more advanced and people actually need more of the supply chain, not just the chips or the memory chips and the logic chips that we talked about, it will continue to broaden out. And so the concentration risk is not so much of a problem right now.
Our Asia Equities reporter, Sang-mi Cha there. Let's get you the latest when it comes to some of these corporate headlines this hour. And a social media account affiliated with Chinese state media says DeepSeek's delayed release of its V4 model points to a shift towards deeper integration with China's chip ecosystem. The startup on Friday released preview versions of its long-awaited new model, but analysts have told Bloomberg that it fails to narrow the gap with leading US products. The account says DeepSeek spent months working to optimize performance using Huawei chips. Watching Nomura shares at the Tokyo Open after it posted a second straight year of record profit fueled by Japan's market rebound, even as fourth quarter earnings missed estimates. Net income of Japan's biggest brokerage rose nearly 3% from a year earlier. Nomura has benefited from volatile global markets and a boom in investing and deal making at home.
With regards to the situation in the Middle East, if the supply chain changes significantly, then we will have to implement a structural change in strategy, and this could affect M&A activity in the long term. But as of now, we're not envisioning such a scenario.
Sorry, Belinda.
More ahead here on the Asia Trade. This is Bloomberg.
Yeah.
close.
Oh, good, Belinda. I'm glad it's better for you.
I'm David Weston. Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. We go on the road for a look at what lies behind the headlines of today and what will likely be the headlines tomorrow.
We need more transparency.
Oil and gas is still important.
They said every citizen should be investing in the market.
Accelerate progress in all fields of science.
Watch Wall Street Week right here on Bloomberg.
More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg. U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
What's the matter, Charisse?
We're about 20 minutes away from the open markets across Japan. Take a look at how we're setting up. A little bit of upside for Nikkei futures. This after we saw already 3 weeks of gains for Japanese equities. The yen weakness continues, headed towards that 160 level and weakening early in the Asia session already. The Bank of Japan, of course, is a big news this week. It's expected to hold at that 0.75% rate. It struck a hawkish tone back in March after the oil spike, but right now markets pricing in almost virtually no rate hike at this point. Bloomberg Economics expects a hike in June. Let's get more on the outlook for the BOJ with our economy and government reporter Erika Yokoyama, who joins me here in the Tokyo studio. So we were at markets pricing in more than 70% of a rate hike just a few weeks ago to virtually nothing. What's going on?
Yeah, right. So we had successfully communicated and eased expectations for the rate hike in April. And, as you said, tomorrow we are expecting the rate, a stand-pat decision at 0.75%. And probably the bank will heighten uncertainty over the Middle East for a reason. And the likely decision, as you said, is already largely priced in by the market. So the real
he showed up last night too.
Is when the next rate hike
and then he left.
Is it going to be June, July, or can be later? And we could possibly see the message through either the policy statement, especially on the section of the board balance of the 9 board members, or simply like Governor Ueda's press conferences as well. And another thing we have to watch tomorrow is that the bank is expected to raise inflation outlook for the current fiscal year significantly, reflecting the recent surge in oil prices, right? So if the upward revision is larger than expected, it's kind of like a signal that the rate hike in the near term is sort of needed to address the situation.
But remember what happened 2 years ago exactly.
I put Starboy in a timeout for 5 minutes.
And we saw the yen just topping 160. Given that, as we have said, markets have largely priced in no move, does that mean, well, I don't want to say we can expect stability in the yen at this point, but are we less scared of a horrible move that could really derail markets?
Well, even if the decision was already priced in by the market, on the BOJ day, we have a higher risk of market action by the governments. Because, for example, back in January, the BOJ kept the interest rate unchanged and the yen weakened. Then U.S. and Japan coordinated and did the rate check, basically linking up the banks to check whether current exchange rate is appropriate. Then that action itself, moved the yen as well. And also back in 2024 spring, and that's the time the government actually did intervention after the yen weakened past 160 per the dollar. And, and especially this time, Japan is entering the Golden Week holiday. The the trading, it will be thinner, then liquidity will be much lower. So there's an incentive for the governments to step in now.
And you and I spoke to the finance
there's lots of those types of rings around now, Belinda.
Speculation in the markets, right? So what should we be watching out for in terms of sort of signaling that we can get from Governor Ueda at the press conference?
Last night was awesome, Billy.
Rate hike happens.
Almost
there
perfect.
Are a couple things, but first things probably
Almost.
like whether Ueda will update the assessment of risks stemming from the Middle East. So far, Ueda and the other bank officials have been saying there is both sides of risks, upside and downside to prices. But like majority of market economists are seeing an inflation risk
Welcome,
skewing
conscious.
to upside. So
Yep.
traders should be watching whether Ueda will agree with this view. And another thing is that Ueda probably shouldn't be overemphasized an uncertain aspect because it's easily associated with the situation last year around this time when the Trump-related uncertainty just caused the BOJ to suspend the rate hike.
The sweeping tariffs, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't want, if the BOJ don't wants to, see the repeat of that, probably BOJ need to clearly tell that the bank is on track for the rate hike as soon as the outlook is materialized.
It'll be a very tricky communication exercise for the BOJ. Erika Yokoyama here in Tokyo. She's our economy and government reporter, of course, with what to expect from the Bank of Japan. In fact, our next guest also says the odds of a rate hike on Tuesday from the BOJ are near zero. Joining us now is Shrikant Kali.
Well, I can't believe in a country with so many guns, we have so many people that can't shoot.
Good to have you with us. So will this be more of a messaging exercise when it comes to the decision on Tuesday?
Oh, absolutely. Tomorrow's day, an event with multiple implications across asset classes, as you already mentioned.
Yeah, I saw that video, Belinda. That was funny.
Close to 0%. So it's not it's an event which doesn't mean from a policy perspective, but it's an event which can give you a lot of signals in terms of what BOJ Governor Ueda is thinking about in terms of the next rate hike. For me, what matters is, are all the preconditions that are important for rate hikes still in place or not? If you look at the recent inflation data, the core CPI of Japan still remains above 2%. If you look at the recent inflation series published by BOJ last month, also continues to remain above 2%. And on the back of geopolitics, on the back of oil prices, we know the inflationary pressure is only going to rise going forward. If you look at the recent wedge data, Sherry, the nominal wedge gains, the base level data increased by 3.3%, which is highest of the past 33 years. Now, I understand BOJ's mandate is not yen, but at 160 level, we all understand it can induce cost-push inflation in Japan. So all the preconditions that are necessary for rate hike do exist. The only fly in the ointment is the geopolitical uncertainty. So I would expect Ueda to wait out to have the resolution. Yes.
But the fundamentals, as you said, are there, right? So how much of this is also political in the sense that this government specifically, doesn't want to see rate hikes too soon? And if that's the case and markets perceive it as the central bank lacking independence, could we see that instability that we've seen in the long end of JGBs?
To be honest, of course, there is a political aspect as far as the bond yields are concerned. But we have to also understand that Japan is eventually a warrant on global growth. The conflict that we are seeing right now, most of the Asian markets, including Japan, have strategic reserves. So we haven't yet seen the impact on the demand side of the equation, Sherry. So if this conflict continues and the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, because of which global growth comes under pressure, you have to understand that Japan is a massive warrant on global growth. On top of that, Japan's operating leverage is highest in the world, which means the impact on Japan's operating profit going to be extremely high. So in light of that, I think it makes sense to me for BOJ to wait out tomorrow. As soon as we have the resolution on this conflict, that's the perfect time for BOJ to increase rates. Although BOJ's mandate is not growth, at the same time it can have implications on Japanese inflation.
And of course, we have no certainty as to whether or when this conflict is going to come to any kind of resolution. But if you talk about the huge vulnerabilities that you're pointing to when it comes to Japanese economy, the longer this drags out, do you think this then endangers the virtuous cycle? You touched on the wage data a little bit earlier.
I'm still blaming Democrats in this interview with 60 Minutes.
There are two parts of this story. What we have seen with Japan over the past 3 years, has been a massive bottom-up revolution, which was missing.
Trump swears he's not a rapist.
30 years. We have seen
or a
doubling
pedophile.
of buybacks to 23 trillion over the past 12 months. Dividends in Japan have risen to almost 27 trillion. Total payouts of Japan have risen to as high as 71% levels. Total yield have risen north of 4%. Cross-holding and buying in Japan is accelerating. Activism surging to record high levels. All of these changes in Japan are unprecedented. What was missing over the past 3 years was this stable, pro-growth political leadership. So to that end, I think for the first time, Japan
46 days, Belinda, that's it.
Twin drivers of strong bottom-up revolution along with pro-growth political leadership, which makes Japan an extremely attractive investment story across the world. Again, my forecast for topics for the year end is 4,000. Japan is already up almost 35%. I'm saying topics from the start of last year. Bulk of those gains have been driven by significant valuation.
No, somebody else mentioned that too, Billy. I didn't see it.
Re-rating-driven upside for Japan market going forwards are limited. At the same time, bulk of the upside for Japan going forward will be driven by sustainable delivery of earnings, which is what I expect. My expectation for topics are 14% earnings growth for March 2027.
That won't go anywhere, Belinda.
Of course, there are risks. If you're heading towards demand destruction, of course, there are risks to Japan, but that's not my base case. I'm expecting early resolution to this conflict.
You are watching the inventory levels, though, right? I understand that's more of a tail risk, but that's something that is worth being aware of?
Oh, absolutely. I think Japan is the only market where inventory as a percentage of sales data is at
I'll have to look it up later.
Levels. Now, if you look at US and Europe, they're still at kind of average of the historical levels. But in the case of Japan, this significant surge in inventory actually happened on the back of COVID. And it was a sensible response from companies. If you break down the total inventory data of Japan, the early surge of inventory was mainly driven by increase in raw materials, where companies wanted to have a seamless production cycle. That's why they had requisite amount of raw material inventory. But that's not the cause of concern for me. The cause of concern for me.
Go ahead.
The cause of concern is the significant increase in the finished goods inventory, because all these companies, if you're heading towards an environment of global growth slowdown, then these companies with significantly elevated fixed goods inventory could be at risk of inventory write-down or, in worst case, inventory write-off. That's the risk for Japanese margins.
So Shrikant, before we let you go, following up on my question on the volatility in JGBs that we could potentially expect from this decision, walk us through what you're watching in the JGB space, also in the equity space, because we have had significant optimism in the equities market in Japan, and where the line in the sand is when it comes to the Japanese yen weakness, when authorities could step in.
Oh, that's a long question. So
Israel runs the show now, Sharice.
Begin with, which has implications on JGB as well.
Netanyahu's got his puppet in the White House.
Since the start of last year, that we have moved from yen being a one-way trade towards becoming a two-way trade. Japanese yen was primarily a function of
We'll see what happens, Belinda. I hope something happens.
And FOMC. That correlation has completely broken down since the middle of last year. Japanese yen has become a function of
really a training program.
There's dovish rate hikes by BOJ. Hawkish cuts by FOMC. So
they should have worked more on his aim.
Towards weakening. But at the same time, we have this fundamental backstop from Ministry of Finance at around 160 to 162 levels. So my base case is the yen will remain range bound between 150 to 160 levels. Now, as far as JGBs are concerned, Sherry, I'm not a fixed income strategist, but on the back of what's happening, the expansionary fiscal policies pursued by Takaichi administration, on the back of no backstop from BOJ, no YCC, I'm expecting bond yields in Japan to remain elevated. So what matters to me is the impact of these elevated bond yields on the equity space. Over the past 25 years, during the periods of elevated bond yields, Japan market on average has delivered strong outperformance. Japanese yen has depreciated, and what you want to focus on as far as Japan market is concerned are the the risk-on styles like value, GARP, and yield at the expense of low vol and quality. That's what I'm recommending to my investors on the back of these elevated bond yields.
Great job in putting everything into perspective on the market. Shrikant Kale, really good to have you with
I
us.
could probably check that out on YouTube, Belinda.
At Jefferies. And of course, you can catch Japan Ahead every Monday, 8:40 a.m. Tokyo time. Subscribers can also watch live on the terminal.
I think I've seen Australian 60 Minutes on YouTube. Here it's on there.
Bloomberg.
On YouTube? Okay.
Every weekday, Bloomberg puts the spotlight on a different aspect of global finance. Flows, funds, and the forces shaping markets on ETF IQ. The future of money with Bloomberg Crypto. The players behind major transactions on Bloomberg Deals. The stories informing finance with Bloomberg Markets. And rates, risk, and the cost of capital on Bloomberg Real Yield. A different topic every weekday, now for a full hour only on Bloomberg Television.
Investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Let's get more now on the weekend shooting in Washington, and President Trump has been using the incident to bolster his case for building a massive White House ballroom. Let's get more with our White House correspondent, Jeff Mason, who was at the event. And Jeff, of course, you're also a former president of the White House Correspondents Association. Talk us through what you saw and how things played out that evening.
Sure. So as most people know now who've been watching a bit of the news over the last 24 hours, the White House Correspondents' Dinner was taking place in Washington last night when an active shooter was able to briefly breach the security perimeter and exchanged gunfire with a member of law enforcement before he was captured. Inside the ballroom, I was sitting at a table with
Charisse, I just looked it up. It's owned by a
and I heard the shots
former Republican state senator named Don Huffins,
covered underneath,
and he's planning on turning it into a Christian retreat. So more pedophilia coming in.
And then really just waited for word about what was happening. There was a lot of sort of questions and not a lot of clarity about what was going on as we were waiting as to whether or not there was still an active shooter. There was speculation that proved not to be correct, that there might have been some kind of an explosive. And the Secret Service, of course, was focused on getting the president and the vice president and multiple cabinet officials out.
Do I get a gold star, Charisse?
So not necessarily telling the rest of us what was going on or what we needed to do.
Or brownie.
How are you expecting this to change the conversation around security, around President Trump? And of course, what are we learning as well about the gunman at this point?
Sure. So the security around any president is always a big deal and a big issue for the Secret Service and for the White House.
Start deleting stuff, Billy.
The president has been painting this as a success story for the Secret Service because they apprehended this man so quickly and before, of course, he actually made it into the ballroom and was able to hurt anyone. As far as broader security questions, one of the questions is whether or not this dinner can happen again. The president said that he'd like to see it happen within the next 30 days. But whether or not that can happen at the same hotel and whether additional security measures will need to be taken, those questions are still being answered. It would seem like the answer, at least to the latter question of whether additional security is necessary, would be yes. As far as the shooter is concerned, he is a 31-year-old.
I appreciate the offer, but one will do. I'm trying to lose weight.
There's been some reporting about a manifesto that he wrote and released very shortly before starting his attack, and that manifesto apparently suggests that he was targeting President Trump and members of his administration.
White House correspondent Jeff Mason there in D.C. Let's take a look at what the hour ahead holds. And of course, we are just about 4 minutes away from the start of cash
No
trading.
cookies, thank
Here
you.
in Australia, it is an Anzac Day public
Welcome,
holiday
Mike.
for much of the country, but the ASX is trading. We're looking like we're headed for a fifth straight day of losses here when it comes to Australia stocks. Not really benefiting much from, of course, the tech-driven rally that we've seen in other parts of Asia and, of course, in the US, driven to those record highs. We will be watching some of the energy names, given that we continue to see those upside moves in oil prices. The Strait of Hormuz shut down, inaccessibility at the very least, going into a third month now, with still a great deal of uncertainty as to when these next peace talks will occur. Nikkei futures, though, looking pretty positive.
That's a good point. Maybe I should start bulking
We're
up.
also seeing Kospi futures looking like we'll see a run out of those gates. This is Bloomberg.
Hot off the presses, Billy. Welcome, Shadow Pop. I heard he voted for Kamala.
Power Players is back to take a look under the hood of the business of Formula One.
Hi, I'm here to see Pierre Gasly.
Welcome to my workplace.
Do you feel pressure?
Massive pressure.
Ferrari is the best example that we can be very proud
Right,
of
Jennifer?
the past to look after the future.
From the iconic brand setting the standard,
Oh boy.
can you imagine Ferrari without racing?
No, and I say no, no, no.
To the newcomers forging ahead.
I grew up my whole life racing against the boys.
This global phenomenon continues to chart new territory.
This was a tennis court 8 days ago.
I can't even believe that. And the speed of the business has never moved faster.
My career might stop. I'll still be driving some.
Yeah. Probably very fast.
Yeah.
This is so exciting!
This season, we're along for the ride.
Earnings season is here.
Earnings season begins. Let's get right to it.
Bloomberg is first to break the numbers.
Netflix here crossing the terminal.
Let's go to a retailer. Urban Outfitters.
His rhetoric does make it worse, and he's not going to change.
Another monster quarter.
A lot still to come.
With the smartest insights.
What are some of the sponsors and some of the CEOs talking about here?
I think the biggest risk continues to be that inflation gets imported around the world again.
Continuing coverage on Bloomberg.
The trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg. Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in the Lesotho Highlands, and this is Bloomberg.
This is the Asia Trade. We're counting down to Asia's major market opens with global stocks around record highs. It's a big week, Heidi, of central bank decisions around the world.
Tell her,
not to
Billy.
mention mega
There's
tech
no
earnings
excuses.
as well.
You would not blame mainly central banks for being sort of paralyzed by the inability to make any strong positions at the moment, right? With the uncertainty over the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices continuing to gain, no progress being made or momentum even when it comes to these peace talks. But at the same time, Sherry, it's a very high bar for some of these tech companies to continue impressing with their forecasts.
And it's really that uncertainty that you mentioned around the Strait of Hormuz, around the war in Iran, that has really changed the tone for the Bank of Japan here, because we have heard more hawkish rhetoric coming from Governor Ueda just last month. For that to be all really turned upside down in the last couple of weeks, of course, growth concerns are now big. We are in an economy that's heavily exposed to Middle Eastern oil. So take a look at
it's
how
not a war,
Japanese
though.
equities
It's an excursion.
online. You can see a little bit of upside for the Nikkei, a little bit of downside for the topics.
I don't know why you feel pressured to fund it. Trump doesn't feel any pressure.
As we head towards a Bank of Japan policy decision just tomorrow, no change expected there. 0.75% expected to be the rate. And as I mentioned, even markets were pricing in more than 70% chance of a move, of a rate hike by the Bank of Japan just in March, for that to be virtually zero now this week. So we'll be watching the weakness of the Japanese yen against the US dollar, because remember what happened 2 years ago in April of 2024 when the Bank of Japan failed to hike rates. We actually saw the yen topping 160, authorities having to come in and try to support the currency.
Bella,
do watch out for JGB's volatility as well. Take a look at how Korea is opening. We mentioned those megatech earnings coming out of the US. Of course, we have tons of suppliers in Asia. We're watching Samsung, we're watching SK Hynix, which of course form about 40% of the Kospi. You can see slight upside early in the session for Korean equities. The Korean won also holding steady at the 1477 level, Heidi.
Take a look, Sherry, as to how we're trading in the first few minutes or so of Australia opening up. We're expecting liquidity to be a little bit thin, given that the likes of New South Wales, for example, off for Anzac Day public holiday today. But still, we are online. We're looking like potentially we could see that fifth consecutive day of losses for really the tech-light market that we have here in Australia. But still, some of those energy names will be in focus, given that we'll continue to see those gains across oil prices. Brent crude coming online, seeing upside of about 0.2%. Also watching treasuries. It's a big week, as you say, for equity traders,
oil keeps going
for
up.
bond traders as well. Central banks really setting those rates, giving potential reasons to sell off those government bonds, particularly when it comes to treasuries. A great deal of uncertainty as we're still watching for what the next developments on the war will be. Well, joining us now is Jasmine Duan, who's a senior Asia investment strategist at RBC Wealth Management. Jasmine, great to have you with us. So we are now heading into potentially a third month of disruptions when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. There's now, of course, a lot of commentary around what the primary but also the secondary and tertiary impact of this energy crisis will be. What are you watching in terms of the major risks to investors?
We think it's very reasonable to assume the negotiations will be back and forth and we will take several rounds, but we still expect a compromise deal can be reached. And the major reason is because both sides wants to end the war, and both sides has laid out their conditions for how peace look like, and both sides have agreed to a ceasefire. And we think China plays a very important role in bringing Iran back to the
She speaks better English than Trump.
So Iran's calculus is more than just how long the regime will last a prolonged war, and China will be the largest beneficiary if the two parties reach a deal. So we think China will want to both sides to have a rapid resolution. And of course, the risks will be to the impact to the economic and to the broader inflation. And we think in general, risk may be smaller than we currently feared, because right now the US inflation risk has come down from the peak. And later this year, if we are seeing a deal is being reached, we may see few months of outright deflation. So inflation at the end of the year is likely to be lower than at the beginning of the year. So full year inflation may be lower than we currently feared.
Some of those reasons would be contributing to why you're still overweight when it comes to US stocks. Are you seeing there to be a lot more runway when it comes to these record gains that we see being driven by big tech?
Right now, we are still cautiously optimistic in U.S. equities. Of course, in the short term, the U.S. equities may be a little overbought, but we are seeing some positives, mainly due to two reasons. First is the broad market participation is still positive. If we look at the advanced decline lines for the S&P 500, it's still at record high level. And typically, equity cycles doesn't end if the market participation
Is that another book he keeps on his nightstand next to Hitler's speeches?
If we look at the tech sector, it contributes to around 50% of the U.S. market cap. And the tech sector is coming up, delivering very solid earnings growth. And counterintuitively, energy crisis or higher energy price is a tailwind for the U.S. corporate earnings because since the start of the war, the S&P 500 earnings estimate has been revised.
He knows more about assassins than anyone in the history of assassins.
From the tech sector, and half of that
comes
from the energy sector. So the earnings growth is still very solid for the U.S. equities. That's why we are still maintaining an overweight position on the U.S. equity market.
How much of that will also be filtered through into the Asian market, given, of course, how many of those tech suppliers are across markets here in Asia?
Yeah, we think investors are trying to look for very solid earnings growth and solid sectors to buy into. And besides from the US AI and tech companies, investors are paying attention to the Asia tech sectors. Especially, we have a very large amount of suppliers here. So if we look at the earnings estimates by, for example, of the Korea tech companies, the memory chips companies, they are expected to deliver 4 to 5 times earnings growth.
I don't know who you're talking about, Belinda.
Earnings growth is still extremely solid, and that's why we're seeing investors' interest continue to go into these sectors. And for the AI tech companies, also we are seeing some positives coming out. The AI model capability continue to improve, and the valuation is relatively attractive compared to their U.S. peers. So investors may still turn attention to the AI Chinese AI companies.
Do you worry about the concentration of some of these big names, the likes of Samsung, TSMC, and their role in terms of their home markets?
Right, to some extent, most of the investors are only looking at the big tech names, and in the short term, we do see some risk of
Belinda, are you talking about Trump's personal preacher woman thing?
In the near term, but overall, it will all come back to the earnings growth. We're seeing the big tech companies deliver very solid earnings, and that's why investors
White or whatever her name is
put their money into these big tech names. So we think the earnings growth will digest the concern on this overcrowded trades and also the short-term overboard in the market.
Outside of tech and AI, how else are you capturing the upside and also obviously mitigating the downside risks?
Trump's a well-known big Christian.
Well, at RBC Wealth Management, we are trying to build a diversified and resilient portfolio so that we can mitigate the risk and capture the upside both from the war and peace scenarios. And that's why right now we are holding both energy, chemicals, and technology stocks. And we are also trying to capture
she's not wrapped too tight.
Market volatility,
none of them
taking advantage of the market movements to do some short-term tactical trades. And we think in this kind of market environment, investors have to be super nimble and flexible. And that's why we need to be more flexible and trade on the focus on some short-term opportunities.
Jasmine, really great to have you with us. Jasmine Duan,
somebody opened a soda.
Asia Senior Investment Strategist at RBC Wealth Management. More ahead here on the Asia Trade. This is Bloomberg.
Yeah, you are correct, Belinda.
Eternal life, a concept that has captivated the imagination of humans since the dawn of time. I'm David Rubenstein. The advances that have been made in science recently has made it possible for people to live much longer than they would have otherwise lived decades ago. With innovation exploding, it's harder than ever to know what's real and what's just hype. On longevity, I talk with the leading experts in science and
You know who's insane? Caroline Levitt.
They might be able to change their conduct. So
Anybody want to guess at how old she is and how old her husband is?
Americans need to know they are at risk of dying from the
I just found this out today.
What we really need in our lives is to build community. Knowledge is power. The generation before us, cancer was considered a sign of weakness, and many never talked about it.
Longevity without health is not valuable, but if you can maintain health, people are productive when they're older.
Join me on a 4-part journey as I explore the great quest for longevity. Only on Bloomberg.
At a time when policy in Washington is driving Wall Street, we draw a distinction between the rhetoric and the action, bringing you market-moving guests and original reporting. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
She's 28. I knew she was young. She's 28. He's 60.
Korean markets continue to gain early in the Asia session. You're seeing the
she's
Kospi
28,
now
Billy.
gaining about 1%.
Jen.
The Kosdaq
He's
also
60
catching
years
up.
old.
As tech companies are leading those gains, you can see on the right side right there how South Korea's stock market rally has really surpassed a lot of other global markets. We're talking about the Kospi gaining more than 150% in the past year. Samsung and SK Hynix, of course, driving that AI boom, making up about 40% of the Kospi. And these Asian markets, in fact, muscling past European markets. Of course, they're more heavily focused on tech and those AI suppliers. Our next guest is at the center of a pivotal moment for South Korea's economy, as that AI-driven export boom is also tested by rising protectionism, energy supply disruptions, and of course, the need to diversify markets and supply chains. Young Han-gu is South Korea's trade minister and joins me now from Singapore. Minister, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, she's a weirdo.
I wanted to start
She's a
asking
grifter.
you about this immense optimism and solid trade numbers, export numbers that we're seeing from South Korea. How much of that story
Welcome, Carl.
do you expect to be derailed by the ongoing war in Iran?
I think overall, the Korea's export has been really robust. For example, for the last 10 consecutive months, the Korean export has been growing. And the last month, which is the March, our export hit the record level of $68
That's the most important thing, Billy.
For the first time. I think it's really driven by kind of strong demand for semiconductors around the world. So despite some concern related to all the tariffs and uncertainty in the Middle East, I think the Korean export has been really showing robust performance so far.
Is there a risk that a lot of the materials, naphtha, rubber, resin, a lot of the things that could potentially go into the supply chains, especially around tech exports, will be hit given the ongoing conflict in the Middle East?
Yes, in fact, the supplies of the naphtha and these are being squeezed. So we are taking domestic measures to kind of restrain the export of this naphtha. At the same time, we really make all out efforts to secure more naphtha from other region than the Middle
Yeah,
East.
could be, Carl.
80% of
They're
our
creepy
naphtha came
people.
from the Middle East. So we are exposed to this kind of potential risk in the region. And now I think diversifying is really a way to go. So now we are making all these efforts to find new alternative sources and partners for this.
Have you gotten any commitments from Asian partners? I know that you've been to India, you've been here in Japan, you're in Singapore
Well, he
right
fucks
now.
couches, Carl, so what do you expect?
Yes, the last week the Korean president made a state visit to India, and actually the Korea and India signed MOU on this cooperation in energy and this sector. Yeah, I mean, I think all these other countries are also struggling with this shortage of naphtha and other the chemical products, but we are making efforts.
I know that you've had perhaps some concerns coming from Indian authorities as well about the SEPA trade deal and how balanced it is. Will that have any implications to how much cooperation you can get from them?
Yeah, I think we had a really this great agreement last week in India to really accelerate this upgrade negotiation for Korea-India, SEPA. I think we have really this great potential. I mean, our economies are complementary. A lot of Korean businesses in automobile, electronics, and shipbuilding, they have invested in India, and they are considering investing in India. So I think upgrading this almost 17-year-old, the framework of trade and investment will actually really boost to further trade and investment between our two countries.
And one of the trade deals that we're watching the most is the one between South Korea and the United States, right? Can you give us an update on the implementation of the $350 billion U.S. investment package? Have you chosen your first project? We're hearing that it could be the Louisiana LNG export project.
Not yet, but I think we are on the right track. The last March, Korea's National Assembly passed a special law to operationalize this $350 billion investment fund. So now we are in the process of, creating a new government agency to execute this investment the project. So now we are in a preparatory mode, exploring, this what kind of project could be really mutually beneficial. I think what is important to Korea is to really make sure that those projects are commercially viable and mutually beneficial. If that's the case, I think this could be turned into really new opportunities for many Korean companies to invest and forge stronger partnership in manufacturing sector with the United States.
Does the Louisiana LNG export project count as one of those feasible ones?
I think that, we are not at this stage to really reveal what kind of projects are being explored and then discussed, but I think we are open-minded about this mutually beneficial and the strategically important those projects in energy and many other sectors.
What's difficult for South Korea and other partners is that the U.S. has also opened a new 301 probe, right, into excess capacity. Any more updates on what's going on there and how you plan to mitigate the benefits that you've gotten from the trade deal so far and the commitments?
Yeah, last November, our two leaders have agreed on this trade deal in APEC summit.
Buckeyes, Carl.
And we are in the process of, the faithfully fulfilling this implementation. But with this, the Supreme Court ruling on IPA, I think right now what U.S. is trying to do is to restore the previous level of tariff, with the 301 investigation. So
Stephen Miller's a literal Nazi.
Really productive and close consultation with the U.S. to really make sure that our trade deals will be honored and the stability will be brought back to our mutual, the bilateral trade.
And of course, Minister, a key issue is also what's happening between the relationship between China and the United States. What do you hope to see or expect to see from the President Trump, President Xi Jinping meeting in May that could help potentially the global trade environment and what's happening between South Korea and these two partners as well?
Yeah, right now, the China is our #1 trading partner, and the U.S. is #2. But it's really kind of neck and neck. So I think it is in our interest to see that stabilization of this U.S.
He's denying that he fell down. It's on video.
Being realized. So
it's hilarious to watch.
See that some more predictability and more stability could be.
Does he understand that the internet is forever?
Kind of, the high-level talks.
And of course, Minister, given, of course, the tensions between the U.S. and China, the geopolitical tensions, of course, in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, we have seen incredible focus on the defense industry. Here in Japan, the government has lifted restrictions on lethal weapons exports. Do you expect to have that a meaningful impact on the competitive edge of South Korea's defense industry, which was also huge?
I think that Korea's the defense industry is actually one of the strongest because we have a really strong manufacturing base.
Bullshit.
And I mean, for the last because of unique the security environment in the Korean Peninsula, I think this the defense industry.
They dragged him out of the chair. He tried to stand up. He took 2 steps and bam, right down he went. So full of shit.
The defense industrial sector could emerge as one of the strong engines for export from Korea's point of view, and I think we exploring all these possible multilateral as well as bilateral cooperation to.
But he's in better shape than any other president in history. He knows more about falling down than any other president ever.
We had the news, of course, last week of the Japanese government rejecting, for example, the buyout of one of the companies, Makino, by MBK, for example. Will that alter the relationship between Japan and South Korea? And what would that mean for future cooperation?
We also learned of this case, but I think this is a kind of specific business case. So we are looking into this case right now, but I think it's too early for me to make any kind of comment on this.
Nobody's going to be held accountable, Carl.
Minister, then before I let you go, how long do you expect this, what some are calling the super cycle in the tech industry, especially with semiconductors, to last? And will it get derailed, or is there the risk of getting derailed by not only the geopolitics around the Iran war and the supply chains, but just the cyclicality of this sector in general, given how much the Korean economy depends on this industry?
Yeah, indeed.
People do worship him, Belinda.
One of the strong driver for our growth in terms of GDP and exports seems to be coming from the semiconductor industry. And as you mentioned, this is highly cyclical. But I think what is important to Korea is to also diversify our source of industrial growth as well as export. So if you look at our export performance, not just
he'll just have the DOJ go after any news organization that runs clips of him falling.
Sectors. For example, this K-culture related, beauty products and food, and
they don't blame Democrats and the press.
They are also emerging as a new engine for the growth and export. So I talk about the diversification in terms of energy sources, but not just that diversification, but in terms of our own industrial and export strategy. I think diversification seems to be the key and the core strategy for us.
Yeah, of course, the world very much enjoying all of that K content. Minister, it's really great to see you. Thank you very much for your time. South Korean Trade Minister Yohan Gu there joining us from Singapore. More ahead. This is Bloomberg.
Maybe, Cherise. She doesn't care about him. She'd probably walk right over him. Did you see the video of Cash sitting in the audience? Sitting at the table, looking around like, what the fuck's going on? He ain't stealing shit this year, Carl.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute global news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Haslida Amin in Davos, Switzerland, and this is Bloomberg.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
Watch Bloomberg Tech.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
You're watching Bloomberg Deals.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
This is Bloomberg Television.
World's most powerful investors don't ring a bell. They quietly reshape entire industries. This is the money shaping the world. The Dealmaker Playbook, where power and billions of dollars change hands every day. From private equity and credit to venture capital and M&A, we bring you the inside scoop on the biggest deals and debates, plus exclusive conversations with finance's ultimate insiders. I'm Danny Berger, and this is Bloomberg Deals. Every Wednesday at noon Eastern, only on Bloomberg Television.
Bringing you up to the minute news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Sherian in Seoul, and this is Bloomberg.
A 31-year-old man is set to be arraigned on Monday over Saturday night's shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington. The acting attorney general says the suspect was probably targeting Trump administration officials, but his exact motive is not yet clear. The president told 60 Minutes why there appeared to be a delay getting him and the First Lady to safety.
Well, what happened is it was a little bit me. I wanted to see what was happening, and I wasn't making it that easy for him. I wanted to see what was going on. And by that time, we started to realize maybe it was a bad problem, different kind of a problem, bad one, and different than what
The rumor is when he got outside, Charisse, he had to hail an Uber to get back to the White House for the press conference.
I was surrounded by
And he was all flustered.
And I probably...
So we want out of our FBI director.
Meanwhile, peace talks between the US and Iran have stalled after President Trump cancelled a planned trip by his top envoys. Tehran says it won't negotiate so long as it's being threatened.
It's very simple. Look, that whole deal is not complicated. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple.
Is the ceasefire remaining? Will you continue the ceasefire?
Haven't even thought about it yet.
Haven't thought about it. Meh.
20 years of suspending enriched uranium.
They offered a lot. They offered a lot, but not enough.
He's going to end up making a deal.
We'll take a look at how we're seeing this continued.
He'll get them to promise not to enrich uranium for like 5 years or 10 years, whatever. That'll be good enough.
2% gains there when it comes to Brent crude, of course.
And this will all have been for nothing.
With really the extended impact of what is already being seen as the biggest energy shock in history on the supply side. We're also seeing, though, that continued drive when it comes to AI and tech-powered gains for Asia Pacific, particularly
yes, it could, Carl.
North Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, of course, has been quite a different picture in terms of the more outsized impact of that oil story. But the MSCI Asia Pacific at the moment seeing upside of about 0.1%. It's a big week when it comes to tech earnings. Of course, a lot of the US giants from Meta to Alphabet to Amazon all really set to really not needing to just meet expectations but out-deliver when it comes to that forward look ahead there. S&P futures down about 0.2%, but of course that is a market that has been pushed to record highs from these tech stocks. More ahead here on the Asia Trade. This is Bloomberg.
To the minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it's happening. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern in Caracas, Venezuela, and this is Bloomberg.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
Breaking news today from Wall Street to Washington.
Earnings season is underway. We're going to get some key reports.
Everything you need to know before the markets open on Monday.
Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a little Bloomberg into your weekend routine.
Guys, buckle up.
Middle East tensions are high.
Both sides willing
It's very rude, Cherise.
The narrative changes moment to moment.
This is the rhetoric that Trump's talking about. This type of rhetoric leads to violence.
For up-to-the-minute reporting.
Breaking news this morning.
Breaking news in the last few minutes.
On-the-ground perspective.
Talking to you from the bomb shelter.
This White House still pushing.
And the analysis you need to make informed decisions fast.
Clearly nothing is
They wouldn't be illegal aliens, would they? Because we're going to have to deport them. Put them in a warehouse first.
Like Bloomberg.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise, and that is what we try to do every morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Stephen Engel at Japan's Akasaka Palace in Tokyo, and this is Bloomberg.
Take a look at how Asian markets are faring. We are really continuing to see that
Don't forget Elon.
Sort of a correlated dynamic when it comes to certain markets, North Asia in particular, Taiwan, of course, yet to come online, but we're watching Japanese and Korean stocks continuing really to benefit from this AI and tech-driven rally. The chip sector, of course, a major heavy lifter at this point, particularly when it comes to markets like Korea and Taiwan. The Nikkei 225 at the moment looking pretty flat. Here in Australia, it is a holiday-thin session with public holidays in some major parts of the country, so we are
Half hour left, guys, then I'm going to be done for the night.
0.6%. We are seeing Australian stocks headed for that fifth session lower. We also do have quite a lot of data today, not in addition to earnings in Asia, but we're also looking ahead to some of those PMIs, industrial profits due out in China today as well. Well, legacy foreign automakers once dominated in the Chinese market, but the 2026 Beijing auto show, I should say, tells a very different story. Domestic EV makers, they're stealing the spotlight, winning over consumers with flashy technology and aggressive pricing. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel reporting from Beijing.
Here's a question for you from the Beijing Auto Show 2026. Is globalization over? Well, that's debatable, of course, here in the auto industry when you have a whole
They got to start selling these cars here.
Foreign car makers competing, of course, with the new entrants in the EV space in a highly competitive price war environment in China. The difference, I would say, is it's still a global industry, but the country that's in the driver's seat perhaps has changed.
For decades, foreign car makers flocked to China with the price of entry essentially being technology transfers to their joint venture partners. Fast forward to 2026, a reverse of that dynamic is on full display. It's the foreigners looking to partner for Chinese technology to stem the tide of their massive market share losses here. Hyundai Motor, for one, is launching its arrow-shaped Ioniq V with local partner BAIC. With autonomous driving tech from Chinese software firm Momenta and batteries from China's CATL. Volkswagen, too, has a relatively new partnership here and a 5% stake in China's XPeng.
Co-developing, co-engineering the ID Unix 08 and 09. It has all the bells and whistles that the Chinese EV buyer wants. Like here in the cockpit, for one, it's all the rage in 2026, and that is touchscreens from the driver's side all the way through to the passenger's side. Keep in mind, Volkswagen used to be the #1 top seller in China of passenger vehicles. They're up against it, though, but they decided China is too big to ignore. They're going to embrace partnerships with the likes of XPeng to recapture some of that lost glory. The legacy American car makers like Ford, also GM, I see Buick right over there, Cadillac's in another hall. They're also here at the Beijing Auto Show, facing the same headwinds, if you will, as the other foreign car makers in this hyper-competitive Chinese market, which is dominated by EVs and also a price war. And that begs the question, how are the Americans, like Ford and their Bronco, how are they going to capture the attention of the Chinese consumer? And how do they strike up new partnerships with the new generation?
Why would you buy a Bronco when you can buy a BYD or a Xiaomi car?
Where they slap 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs shipped to America. Feature-rich and quick feature refresh are the hallmarks of Chinese EVs. Like Series, it's risen to the top of the ultra-luxury segment in China by offering a lot of funky options for its big SUVs like this, the latest M9. It offers
I'm with you, Carl.
refrigerators on board,
Welcome, Ryan.
systems, and this one, the headlights even turn into mobile projectors in color. They've They've also licensed technology for an onboard toilet for some vehicles, if that's your thing. For the multitude of domestic Chinese EV makers, it's all about grabbing attention while they're still alive. Because there's going to be a reckoning. With this price war, it's just the beginning of a weeding out period. So companies like this, with the GAC, which is Guangzhou Auto, I'm not saying that they're not going to survive, but they're going to be one of the car makers that is going to be fighting for survival. Many people I've talked to here at the Beijing Auto Show say by 2030, so in just 4 years' time, there could be far fewer. We're talking from dozens to a handful of domestic EV makers by the end of this decade. Stephen Engel, Bloomberg News.
What you doing?
The Beijing Auto Show.
And it's a busy week for earnings for Chinese automakers as well. We have BYD and Geely reporting this week in what will be one of the busiest weeks for Asia's current earnings season. Bloomberg Intelligence says they may be poised to benefit from higher EV demand given the oil shock. Asia Equities reporter Charlotte Yang joins us now from Hong Kong. What are we expecting from BYD and Geely then?
Yes, it's an action-packed week for China EV investors. As it is concluding the Beijing Auto Show, the eyes are now turned to the earnings results this week. And you have BYD, the sector bellwether, reporting on Tuesday, and then its aspiring domestic challenger Geely reporting on Wednesday.
What's up, Kinsley?
So the earnings picture is looking less rousy, unlike the early optimism over its strong overseas demand. While the overseas demand has been really strong, especially since the Iran war, where the oil shock has boosted consumers' awarenesses of buying new energy vehicles, investors are more focused on how much of those overseas sales can actually meaningfully cushion their domestic weakness. So for BYD, even though overseas story is so strong, you're expecting its first quarter sales to continue to decline for the third consecutive quarter, and earnings per share is expected to decline for the fourth consecutive quarter. And for Geely, while overseas sales overall on a stronger beat, we're also expecting to see earnings coming into pressure. So I think for investors, the key is now shifting back to profit. How much money do you actually make per vehicle, and how does that compare to the previous quarters? Domestically, you have the discounts for selling new models, and also there is a rising material cost. So a lot of the tensions will be actually focusing on how are they able to manage those raw material costs, and how are they coping with the domestic discounts.
Busy week, in fact, the busiest week when it comes to Asia Pacific and earnings. What are you watching out for, and how high are the stakes?
Yes, so it is the busiest earnings week for Asia Pacific earnings. You have over 400 companies that make up that are members of the MSCI Asia Pacific Index reporting. And this earnings season, every earnings seasons matter, but this one is different because it provides a first window for us to gauge the impact from the Iran war. So a lot of the tensions will be focusing on those, for example, energy companies, defensive companies that are seen as more benefiting from the higher energy prices. Well, on the other side, like we mentioned, for transport, like airlines, and also some of the consumer
we do have to learn to adapt, Linda.
On how their profitability responding to these higher energy prices. So if on the airlines front, you have Air China reporting. Also on the oils, you have PetroChina, and another sector that's focused is obviously AI that has been continuing to show really strong momentum. We're seeing Korea's Kospi, Taiwan hitting fresh highs. And this week you have MediaTek reporting that has been getting so much on the optimism tied to the TPUs. And also today you have Japan's Advantest that will provide some color in terms of those AI testing. So I think overall the energy sector, transport, as well as the tech sector will continue to be in focus.
Bloomberg's Asia Equities reporter Charlotte Yang there. Well, China's auto exporters had a strong March. Overseas sales of electric vehicles and hybrids hitting a record high due to rising gasoline prices. But Bloomberg opinion columnist Juliana Liu says one of China's largest EV joint ventures is failing to capitalize on the oil shock and is losing ground to bigger rivals. Juliana joins us now in Hong Kong. So you're talking about Wuling. Why is this company losing ground to the likes of BYD, Geely?
Well, as we just heard from Charlotte, you know, BYD and Geely, in terms of exports, it's really going gangbusters. These are the biggest and baddest competitors in the car market, not just in China, but increasingly globally. So, and Wuling is a relatively small joint venture in the southwest of China. So we're not really talking apples to apples. But that said, one thing that Wuling has is a line.
It's too bad there's a 100% tariff on these cars from China. They'd be dirt cheap here.
Rolling out over the last few years. And you would think that this is exactly the kind of model that should be poised to be doing really well during this generational oil shock. It's really tiny. It's about 1.5 meters high and wide. It can seat maybe 4 people at a squeeze, and it's something that is well poised to kind of take over from the kind of two-wheelers that we see across South and Southeast Asia, and these are countries that are really suffering from the oil shock. So a great opportunity for Wuling. Its cars have been doing really well in China. Its flagship model, when it was launched about 6 years ago, it was the best-selling model in China for 2 of those years, and last year it was the second best-selling after Geely. But we're not seeing it really take advantage of this generational opportunity. Its sales in the first quarter were down 7%.
Yeah, that was a tariff that Biden put in place.
Really advantage of that opportunity. Is the blame here to be put on the owners like SAIC and GM?
So I think what's going on here is that paradoxically, Wuling is not a problem child. It's actually chugging along quite well at a time when GM is going through lots of ruptures, lots of changes. At a time when SAIC seems to be really focused on its own brands, like its own MG and Bro. And that strategy looks to be going pretty well because its first quarter sales were actually up 40%. And of course, this is when the entire market is shrank in that period. So SAIC, the senior partner, very focused on its own brands. GM focused again on other things. It's got its own separate joint venture with SAIC.
You do you, Ryan.
The two are in talks, according to Bloomberg News. We've reported it's in talks to resume that 30-year joint venture, but we don't actually have word yet. So it really looks like the attention is really elsewhere, and some of this opportunity is being missed.
The oil shock, when you talk about this sort of missed moment, right, do we see a permanent loss of competitive edge here, or is that something that could be regained?
No, so I wouldn't say that it's exactly losing its competitive edge. I think the edge is still there, and I think even this year we'll see the Hongguang Mini doing fairly well in China. Although I have to admit the loss of subsidies, the pullback of subsidies is hitting mini cars especially hard. But I would say, what makes it competitive still makes it competitive. In this case, unfortunately, it's a loss of opportunity rather than a loss of competitiveness, if that makes sense.
Bloomberg opinion columnist Juliana Liu there joining us from Hong Kong. Right, take a look at some of the big movers in the Japanese session right now. We are watching shares like Denso at the moment, as we heard that it's set to withdraw its proposal to take over semiconductor maker Rome. The two sides were unable to see eye to eye on an offer, according to local media Nikkei. We're also following the likes of Fanuc. Their shares surging now more than 11%. Their forecast beat estimates. The automation equipment makers' outlook was solid on the demand for robots. And you're also watching Kian's
That's right,
shares,
Kinsley.
Popping at the moment, more than 15%.
Well, they get socialism too. They get bailouts.
This is a maker of factory automation sensors reporting quarterly operating income above analyst estimates. We have more ahead. This is Bloomberg.
how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Every weekday from 3 to 5 Eastern.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm David Gura.
I'm Lisa Mateo.
And I'm Christina Ruffini. We're tracking breaking news today from Wall Street to Washington.
Let's start overseas.
Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a little Bloomberg into your weekend routine. Watch, listen, stream.
Knock that over.
Robocar startup Glideways is in talks to raise $250 million in a new funding round that could push it to unicorn status. The Sam Altman-backed company is pitching a future of pod-like vehicles that provide on-demand rides on dedicated expressways. Joining us now is the founder and co-CEO, Mark Seeger. Great to have you here in the Tokyo studio.
Good morning. Thank you.
So you're in a very capital-intensive development stage right now. What are you planning to do with it?
Well, the fundraise that you're referring to is really a reflection of the momentum we're seeing in the business. This year, we're launching 4 customer-funded pilots, and next year, we're launching our first commercial systems around the world.
How viable is your technology right now, especially as opposed to, say, open-ended, on-the-road autonomous vehicles?
That's a great question. So open road robotaxis that we see a lot in the United States and certainly in China, I mean, they're really exploding there. To us, those are AV 1.0 because, Sherry, an autonomous vehicle stuck in traffic is just a car stuck in traffic. And if you deploy hundreds or even thousands of autonomous vehicles, robotaxis on congested streets, you're just going to make congestion worse. What we think is that autonomous vehicles, AV 1.0, are just a stepping stone to putting those vehicles on purpose-built flow networks. And that's what Glideways does. We build flow networks. We're a new mobility system that is designed around continuous movement instead of traffic. And so you don't stop, you don't transfer, you don't sit in congestion, you go directly to where you want to go. And because Glideways is built as a network rather than a collection of vehicles, we deliver far greater throughput capacity at a fraction of the cost. And that's why cities around the world are deploying it.
And you're talking about cities, especially metropolis. Is that why you're here in Japan? I know that you have a lot of Japanese partners as well.
We do. We're in Japan, and we're in the Middle East, and in South Asia, and in India, and various other places, because the through line around the different markets around the world is that people are realizing, not just cities, private developers, airports, we have lots of different kinds of customers, they're all realizing the same thing, and that is that trying to manage traffic is a losing battle. Our mobility systems today, whether they're subways, buses, or cars, are all based on the concept of interruption. Well, that's not going to work. We need something that scales infinitely, and that's what a flow network is. Now, Japan is very special for us. Japan is a market not only where people understand first principles thinking here and system design thinking, but some of our most important strategic partners are in Japan too. Let me give you one example. Suzuki. Suzuki is an incredible company. They're over 100 years old. They have more engineering and manufacturing acumen than a company like ours will ever have. So they're not just part of our scale plan. They're core to our strategic execution globally. And that's why we're in Japan. Now let's talk about the Middle East for a second. The Middle East is all about ambition. The governing philosophy in the Middle East is leapfrogging. They don't ask the question, how can I manage traffic? They ask the question, how can I leapfrog traffic altogether? And so the same through line is what we're seeing all over the world, in the United States as well, and in parts of India.
Do you have a target in terms of how many cars you're targeting to manufacture per year or per project with Suzuki?
We don't actually have a target because we don't think about it as individual vehicles. We're providing a flow network, and a flow network is a system. When you're thinking about AV 1.0, that's a question of how many vehicles are out there. But when you think about flow networks, AV 2.0, the winners are not the people who build the vehicles. The winners are those who control the networks. And we provide the network layer. That's how we think about ourselves. And so we care about how many people can we move quickly and help decongest streets. You know, one of the things that we've learned and that we can all relate to is that traffic is a quiet filter. It's kind of a repressant
there you go, Belinda.
Human potential. And we want to relieve
You don't have to worry about gas prices.
The best way to relieve that is to provide better access to mobility, because for that, you get better access to economic opportunity. And that thought, that fundamental mission statement that we have, aligns very well with cities and private developers whose mandates are congestion relief and, of course, emissions relief.
You touched on the Middle East as another key market, and I know that you've just wrapped up a trip there. Given the ongoing geopolitical uncertainties, the uncertainty of the war, can I get a bit of insight in terms of what sort of investor sentiment?
There you go, Billy. Magic is good, right?
Felt like while you were there?
Certainly. It was quite extraordinary. If I can take a step back, what we're seeing in the Middle East right now and what I saw over my trip during the last 2 weeks there is, frankly, business as usual. Ambition is extremely high. They're trying to remove roadblocks, no pun intended, to getting our product out there. We're launching our first trial there in September this year. So things are moving along, and they're pushing us to move as fast as we can.
What do you see as being the major competition? I know China is obviously one of them. Are there sort of lessons learned when it comes to that market, which is in a lot of ways quite a pioneer market for a lot of this new technology, right? Do you think there are things that have been achieved in that market that can be replicated, or similar types of momentum be achieved in other markets?
What's happening in China is extraordinary. I mean, autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles are indeed exploding. But I think we have to take a step back, which is that the autonomous vehicle is an extraordinary piece of equipment. It's an amazing, revolutionary new technology. And if I may, the example I like to think of is the internet, which when it was invented some 30 or so years ago was a revolutionary technology. But like robotaxis, when
the internet doesn't drive me off a cliff
and fit it onto an existing infrastructure, an existing roadway built for human riders, and the internet at that time was fit onto copper wires built for human voice, you constrain it. You really have to think bigger. You have to take this revolutionary technology,
right,
and
Billy?
put it
He's
on
talking his
something new
book.
That really releases the full potential of an autonomous vehicle, a robotaxi, which is one of experience, so you don't have to sit in congestion, one of capacity, you have to move more people in less space, and of course one of economics. So in the same way the internet was unconstrained when it was moved from copper wires built for voice to, let's say, fiber optic, autonomous vehicles really are the stepping stone to AV 2.0, where you take those vehicles and you orchestrate them very carefully on a dedicated flow network. And that's what our customers around the world, which are both cities and private developers and airports big and small, are starting to see. And we're trying to catch up to demand.
How challenging are the regulatory hurdles, especially between jurisdictions?
That's such a great question. For us, because we're eliminating the, let's call it the infinity problem of guessing what a human driver is going to do, or a bicyclist, or a pedestrian who's maybe going to cross the road or maybe going to get into their car, an autonomous vehicle, AV 1.0, has to account for all of that. And so the regulatory framework is really tough. For us, we find the regulatory frameworks are actually an enabler, because we eliminate most of those uncertainties. We have dedicated lanes and nobody can walk on them. And so for us, we find that our regulatory frameworks align to the mandates that cities have when we talk about cities as a customer, which are, again, reducing traffic and reducing emissions.
Mark Seeger, really good to have you here, in our Tokyo studio, founder and co-CEO of Glideways. We have more ahead. This is Bloomberg.
Right, Billy? All right, everyone, I think that's it for tonight. I'm going to cut it a little short. Thank you all for joining. I'll be back at some point next week. Keep your eyes and ears open, and have a good week. Love you all. Talk to you later. Bye.